This is both at noon, by the way. We'll take some time first and foremost to talk about the ABC game that's happening at noon, and that will be your 76 Birmingham Bowl. The company is called 76. That's who's sponsoring this bowl game. The Birmingham Bowl should be an exciting one. We'll have one of the better group of 5 teams in the country in the Troy Trojans. They are going to be taking on the Duke Devils, the Duke Blue Devils out of the ACC, and this is going to be a really interesting case of who has a culture that is going to outlast their head coach longer, right? So Duke's head coach has left for the opportunity to coach at Texas A&M, and then Troy's head coach, he left as well. He left for Tulane. So neither head coach is going to be coaching in this bowl game. Both of them are interim coaches. Duke does have a head coach in place in Manny Diaz, coming from Penn State. He was a defensive coordinator there over the course of this season. While Troy, I believe Troy is doing their head coaching search still. I don't believe Troy has named a head coach. If I'm wrong, let me know down in the comment section. Let's talk about the game at hand. So right now, what we have here is Troy is favored over the Duke Blue Devils. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about this Power 5 team first. That's had a solid regular season. And then we'll talk about these favorites in the Troy Trojans. So we go to the underdogs first and foremost. How does Duke end up winning this game? What does that scenario look like? So we know Duke is going to be in that transitional period as we wait for the Manny Diaz era to start. And it's always tricky when you have a new head coach in place. We saw this as Syracuse. Syracuse won't have some exciting things this upcoming season, this upcoming offseason. They looked like a team that was in limbo, while Southern Florida, their coaching staff was more intact, and that showed in the Boca Raton Bowl. Luckily, both teams seem to be dealing with that, so it's going to be real interesting to see who handles that a little bit better. That's going to be more on the players to be leaders. Who's the more player-led team is the $1 million question. Because for Duke, Mike Elko is gone for Texas A&M. But that's not the only key loss. The quarterback, Riley Leonard, he is also not going to be playing in this bowl game as well because he has entered the transfer portal. He's at Notre Dame. He's going to be at Notre Dame next season. And there's also a boatload of other Blue Devils that are going to be in the transfer portal. So for all intents and purposes, they are going to not have many of their key guys in this game. However, when Troy while they have been consistent all season long, they have been a terrific team this season. Detroit Trojans have played 2 particularly strong teams, James Madison and Kansas State. Those 2 games were both losses, and those were games where the Troy offense couldn't even get past 14 points. And when Riley Leonard was hurt, Duke was able to avoid a complete collapse because they were able to rely on that defense. Now, will their offense come out and hang 45 on the board? Probably not, because this Troy defense is also pretty good as well. It will at least be enough for Troy to prevent the other team from taking control and owning the time of possession. Troy will have a good pass rush, and there's more than enough pressure coming to keep anyone in the backfield from getting comfortable. But that being said, their offensive front is a strength. Their offensive front is a particularly strong offensive front, and that will be important for whoever is going to be starting for the Duke Blue Devils in this upcoming matchup. As of right now, it does seem like the quarterback that they will likely run out there will be Grayson Loftus. He's a freshman. He's a true freshman. And in the 5 games that he appeared in, he's played some solid games. He's played some solid football. Last time he led them against Pitt. They won 30-19, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. While he doesn't put up eye-popping stats, his completion percentage is barely above 50%. He has done enough to win these games and at least rely on the defense to go out and do their job as well. So if you're Duke, as long as Grayson Loftus is that game manager, you don't have to be the hero, so to speak, but manage the game. Don't be the reason why your team loses, and play good complementary football. The ground game for Duke needs to average over 5 yards a carry. You got to get that run game going. And conversely, if you're the defense for Duke, Troy is predicated on that running game. You keep the Trojans from getting 150 yards on the ground. You keep that score a little bit on the low side. You keep it tight throughout. You can give yourself a chance to win. Because when Duke does play extremely well on defense, you keep teams from 380 yards of total offense. You keep them from getting to that milestone. You're 5-0. And Troy has failed to do that a few times, 4 times, but 2 of those were against those stronger opponents, James Madison and Kansas State. However, that's where we get to how Troy can come out and win this game. Because if Troy can generate any sort of offense, Duke is going to be in some trouble in this game. Because while it's not like the Blue Devils can't do anything offensively, but they have struggled with their downfield passing game themselves. Their overall air attack, and this is even with Riley Leonard playing, it was one of the worst in the ACC. They were second to last. And besides the North Carolina game, because rivalry games are always a little bit on the weird side, this team isn't built to crank up the points in a firefight. So for Troy, it's very simple. Get this to a little bit more of a shootout. Stylistically, Troy would be favored in that kind of situation. Yes, the Duke offensive line is good in pass protection, but that doesn't always translate into overall production. Meanwhile, the Troy pass rush is one of the best among the nation, at least from a statistical standpoint. They know how to get to this quarterback, and it's a big reason why their defense is extremely good on third downs, which that could be a huge problem for the Blue Devil attack, especially if you get them into third and medium, third and long situations. So to keep hammering this, it's just going to be about Troy's ability to get a few points on the board. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to talk about a padlock stat, a key stat to look at. Duke has yet to win this season when their defense has allowed more than 21 points. And half the time, that's exactly what happened. They're 1-5 when they give up more than 20, but 21 specifically, they haven't won a single game. They're 0-5 in that regard. And this is where those losses to the portal and the opt-outs, they're going to matter. They'll be okay in the starting 11, Duke will, but they're going to have a depth issue. And if Troy is able to control the time possession, they're able to crank out long, methodical drives, you could really wear down the depth of Duke's defensive front. So for Troy, it's simple. You got to be methodical. Turnovers and penalties, they haven't been a problem. You have to make sure you play a relatively good game. Maybe at most 1 turnover. Got to also have a good balance and keep trying out different things to see what works. There's going to be something that Duke will struggle with, and when you find that, if you do find it, you got to exploit it. Sometimes the best thing that you can do as an offensive coordinator is just continue to do something if it works. It's what Michigan did in their game against Penn State. Penn State had a hard time stopping the run. Michigan just kept with that running game the entire second half. And while it wasn't the prettiest win back then, it was the most surefire way that team could win with an interim head coach. So, the model believes in Duke a little bit more than what Vegas does. Vegas has a 7.5-point line, while our line is only a field goal. I think the Duke players on this team have a lot of pride, but I do agree that the The depth is going to be an issue. It could be a defensively like battle kind of game. Could be where winner just has to score 24 points. If the winner gets to 24, you got nothing to worry about, right? So I think because Troy will have a little bit more depth, I think Troy will come out. They're going to win this game, but Duke's going to put up a fight. I don't think Duke is going to not cover. So to recap for the Birmingham Bowl, we got Troy winning this game outright, but we are going with Duke covering that plus 7.5. So Duke will likely lose in our eyes, but I think it will be a one possession game. It will certainly be very close.